Okay, we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Happy Earth Week. We're so excited to be here with you today from the Marine Mammal Center. If you're tuning in for our Facebook Live for Earth Day week, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to be diving in and talking all about whales in San Francisco Bay. So I'm joined today by two experts, Bill Keener and Dr. Tim Markowitz. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second, but I do want to give people a minute to join the live here. And as we're waiting to get started, I would love to know where you're tuning in from today and how you've been celebrating Earth Week. We've actually been doing a couple of these lives, one yesterday on actual Earth Day, all around disentangling an elephant seal in the field. And the day before that, we actually did a live around response and kind of what happens after the phone call. For anyone tuning in that isn't aware, at the Marine Mammal Center, the way we receive our patients is through phone calls to our 24-hour hotline. So we did a little special live on what happens after the call. So be sure to check out those other lives here on the Facebook page. And of course, today we are here to talk about whales in San Francisco Bay, all part of our Earth Week celebration, which this year's theme has been restoring our planet. So we've saved unbiasedly the best for last, I would say. And we're going to jump in here and talk about whales in the bay, joined by our cetacean or whale and dolphin experts. So to just briefly introduce myself as well, hello, welcome. My name is Laura Gill. I am the Community Engagement Manager at the center. So I have the privilege of overseeing all of our educational outreach and community engagement along our range in California, as well as out in Hawaii. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over. Perhaps we'll start with Bill, if you'd like to introduce yourself first.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Laura. Yeah, I'm glad to be here with everybody. And I'm Bill Keener, and I work on the cetacean field research team at the Marine Mammal Center, cetaceans meaning whales, dolphins, and porpoises. And I've been very interested in the Bay for a long time. I grew up in San Francisco, so I've seen the amazing changes going on in San Francisco Bay over the last few decades. And really, it's changed in the last 10 years because 10 or 12 years ago, we had no cetaceans in San Francisco Bay. And now we've got harbor porpoises, bottlenose dolphins, and humpback whales and gray whales. In fact, I celebrated Earth Day by going out this morning to Cavallo Point, which is a little point that sticks out into the bay under the Golden Gate Bridge. And I saw a gray whale and a humpback whale today. That's something that in years past you could never do, is see two large whale species in one day in San Francisco Bay.
That's amazing. Thank you, Bill. And I'm sure our local Bay Area residents are excited to hear that they could potentially get out and see some of these cetaceans or whales and dolphins as well. And Dr. Markowitz, would you like to introduce yourself for us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Tim Markowitz. Like Bill, I am a Bay Area native and longtime resident. I did leave my beloved Bay Area for a time, and I studied whales and dolphins all around the world, in the Gulf of Mexico, in New Zealand, South America, South Africa, and all the way up in Alaska. And then came home to discover that right here in San Francisco Bay, where it was very, very rare to see whales growing up, and you never saw dolphins here at that time. Now, on a daily basis, we can see whales, dolphins, and porpoises in San Francisco Bay. Very, very exciting. Some new things we're seeing. And I could see here, we've got a picture. Bill, did you take this one of a few bottlenose dolphins?
Yeah,
Wonderful.
This is a bottlenose dolphins that came into San Francisco Bay, and that's actually the Richmond-Santa Fe Bridge in the background. So they were way into San Francisco Bay, running around in small groups. So it was really wonderful to see.
Yeah, we had one individual, Kaimi, that was hanging out way up in Alameda area for months and months on end, more than a year, right, Bill?
Yeah, almost 2 years.
Yeah. And where do you think these guys started their life, Bill? I have a feeling I know the answer, but why don't you share with everyone?
So yeah, these cetaceans are amazing because they're long-lived. Bottlenose dolphins can live 50 years. And so we can tell each individual dolphin apart by looking at nicks and notches on their dorsal fin. So when we photograph them, we can compare photos with those taken before, including photos taken by researchers decades ago in Southern California. So some of the individual dolphins living in San Francisco area right now started their lives in the 1980s in San Diego, and they've moved up north.
That's incredible to see species coming back and moving up into our area, especially for locals such as ourselves. And I'm curious too, I mentioned that the theme of Earth Day this year is restoring our Earth. And speaking of all these species coming back to the Bay, is the health of San Francisco Bay restored? What is it looking like out there?
Well, I can tell you that, growing up in the 50s, 1950s, when I was really little, I remember crossing the bridge and the bay would stink because there was raw sewage flowing into the bay. There was industrial pollution flowing into the bay from the cities ringing the bay. And so that's all changed. We've got laws in place to protect the waters. And over the years, it's gotten better and better water conditions. So that brings fish. And fish are what has been attracting these dolphins and whales and porpoises into the bay. So it's all about food, but now San Francisco Bay is cleaner and it's a lot more productive, and there's fish populations in there.
That's
yes,
excellent.
all these whales and dolphins we've now seen, documented feeding in the bay, and they do it different ways, right? Harbor porpoises chase individual fish. Whereas, of course, the humpback whales have this spectacular gulp feeding. And gray whales are benthic foragers, so they don't eat fish at all. They rake through the muck in the bottom of the bay. What
And
about those
we've been
dolphins, Phil? How do they eat? Or what do they eat?
Yeah, the dolphins, they will attack pretty much any fish of any size. So what's been really amazing to see is they will go after salmon, huge salmon in San Francisco Bay, something that they can't get in Southern California, but they're finding new food resources up here. And that just goes to show how adaptable they are. But it's also a sign that climate change is affecting them. And that is probably what has led them to move north out of Southern California, where the water's been warming. And they've come up with El Niños when the water's been warm off our coast. But then because they're intelligent mammals, they've learned how to navigate, how to find food, how to raise calves in our area. So they're here to stay, it looks like.
So, speaking of some of these changing ocean conditions that could be affecting marine mammals along our coast and in San Francisco Bay, I'm sure some of our audience that's tuned in today knows that within almost just over a week, we actually saw several gray whales, unfortunately, wash up in the Bay Area onto our shorelines. And I'm wondering, perhaps you can share a little bit more. What's going on in the ocean to cause this? Why are we seeing these gray whales? And perhaps we'll start with you, Tim.
Okay. Starting in 2019, NOAA Fisheries, who the Marine Mammal Center works with closely, the agency we work with closely, declared an unusual mortality event for these animals. We were finding a lot of them dead along our shoreline over the past 2, now going on 3 years. And many of them were quite thin, quite emaciated. And that indicates a problem with feeding. Now, traditionally, these animals do not come into San Francisco Bay or our area to feed. Rather, they migrate along our coastline as they go from their breeding areas in Baja California up to their feeding areas in the Arctic. And we know summer sea ice in the Arctic is dramatically reduced relative to previous years. There was a previous unusual mortality event also associated with a large El Nino event. And at that time, an estimated 1/4 of the world population of gray whales perished. The good news after that was they recovered, and their numbers are, impressive once again, but there are animals that are starving along our coastline. Another cause of death is ship strike, unfortunately. And that's one thing that our team is really working to try to reduce the risk of ship strike for both humpback whales, which you can see on your screen here, that come here to feed, and also gray whales. And these animals are increasingly spending extended stopovers in San Francisco Bay to rest, and we now know also at times to feed, at least to get a small snack on their way back up north to the Arctic.
I see. And for anyone tuning in, an unusual mortality event, do you want to explain, Tim, what that means and who is the one to declare that? What is the center's role in that?
Sure. Do you want to take that one, Bill?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So unusual mortality event is really what NOAA uses for basically a wildlife emergency. It means there's some extreme event going on affecting the gray whales, and by declaring in a formal event, it frees up some money to study the problem. They gather a team of scientists, and the Marine Mammal Center is part of that team. And so one of the things we want to do is go out with every dead whale and do a full necropsy, which is an autopsy on an animal, a post-mortem examination, and get as much information as you can from that individual carcass, so that we can tell, what happened, like what Tim was talking about, whether it's, there's starvation at work, or there's a ship strike, whether there's a disease that's involved. So all that's really important. And the idea is, after the end of a reporting period, we should be able to have some ideas about what might be affecting the gray whales. And there's a couple of theories. And, one is that there's less food in the Arctic. There's climate changes going on there, and there's less sea ice that could be affecting the food web. But also, gray whales have been very successful. Remember, we used to hunt these animals a long time ago, and in the 1800s in particular, and their populations was way down, and they've rebounded. There were, just a few years ago, 27,000 gray whales along our coast. Well, now they've probably lost, just in the last 2 or 3 years, probably about a quarter of that number. So we'll see if they rebound again. We hope they will. But again, knowing what part humans have played in their deaths is critically important. And that's where the Marine Mammal Center is really literally the first responder on the front lines.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill. And yes, it's heartbreaking, kind of a morbid subject, but as you said, so important that we have our team helping to do this investigation and collect information around these gray whales so that we can put protections in place and restore the health of our oceans for these marine
I did
mammals.
want to mention too, Laura, that the other thing that we saw recently is that there can be entanglements, that these whales are in areas where there's fishing gear or crab pot gear, and they can get lines wrapped around them sometimes. And we've seen that recently. And that's why it's so important that the Marine Mammal Center has this new whale disentanglement team that can go out in boats with experts and try to free whales from line entanglements.
Absolutely. Our team is pretty fantastic with not only these special rescue operations, but your work as well with the cetacean field research. And I'm curious too, when you're doing your photo catalog and you're looking at these individuals coming into the bay, is this part of your work as well, helping investigate for the unusual mortality event?
So Tim, you want to respond to that one?
Well, one of the things I think I can share, this is hot off the presses, brand new information. I mentioned we now know that all 4 species of cetaceans that we get in San Francisco Bay regularly, we've documented feeding. We only just this past month confirmed gray whales feeding in San Francisco Bay. Now you're looking, those are not gray whales, those are humpback whales feeding on anchovy. Great picture there. I believe that you took that one, Bill, right? And as I said, the gray whales, they feed benthically. That means they go down to the bottom of the bay. They have, some really the shortest baleen. It's only about, this big. There's a picture of it there. And they roll over on their sides and they rake through the muck, and they get marine invertebrates out of that. And so we confirm this. We confirm this by seeing this repeated diving with big mud plumes coming up, and tracking a few different photographically identified individuals doing this over a period of time. And actually, subsequently, two of those necropsies showed evidence of feeding as well. So this is kind of brand new information. We're finding out that these animals are coming into the bay, staying to rest and also to feed, which is pretty exciting. And again, for both these gray whales that use the bay as a stopover, and also for humpbacks that come here to feed, one of the things we're trying to get the word out is just to anybody boating around the bay, just pump the brakes a little bit. Just take it a little bit easier and watch for whales in the bay. And another thing you can do is to report to us, to our cetacean field research team, and to the Marine Mammal Center if you see any whales. Any whale sightings we're always interested in, especially if you have quality photographs. You might actually contribute to our research. And then also, especially if you see a sick or injured or entangled or dead whale, please report that on the website.
Yeah, and Tim, I think it's worth mentioning that this kind of support as sort of citizen scientists, members of the public out there helping us is great. And the other thing is we also need financial support. And this month we've got this fantastic deal where you can double your dollar donation with this matching gift if you text to this number that's on the screen here. And that's really a great opportunity, and it helps us directly keep our operations going so we can get out for boat fuel, for our equipment, to get out of the water and look at these populations while they're out there living and breathing out in our bay and right off our coast. So your help really goes really directly towards our observations and research on these whales, and that leads to conservation outcomes too, because we don't do this in a vacuum. We're not doing this for the pure science. We're doing it to protect the whales and to give information, scientifically based information, to the managers, the government agencies that work on whale issues and dolphin issues. And all our information goes right to them, and we try to push policies that protect the whales.
Yeah, two projects we're working on right now. One is a risk assessment for ship strike mortality for these animals, looking at their overlap and their foraging habitat with vessel traffic. And another is looking at entanglement histories. And both of these, the idea is to really be able to inform everyone, work with governmental partners, but also the public, and other interested parties, right, to try to really reduce the risks to these animals, because they're coming into the bay for the first time, which is something we should celebrate in large numbers. And this shows that populations have recovered. But this also brings them into a very urban environment. There's a lot of traffic there. And so ideally, we can find ways to live with and appreciate these animals without harming them. And that's what we're trying to really help everyone do.
That's amazing. And thank you for sharing with how people can get involved to help with this work, whether that's reporting sightings through our citizen science portal, whether that's if you're actually in the bay, reducing your boat speed, or even donating, as Bill had shared, is a huge impact for us as well. And again, that donation will be matched this week through Sunday for Earth Day, thanks to one of our very generous board members, Greg Friedman, who is matching donations. So thank you for those concrete suggestions for ways that people can help support our work and whales as well. I do see a couple of questions coming in to our comments here. And for anyone listening, feel free while we're talking to put any questions you have for our whale experts. You have their undivided attention right now. So great time to ask questions. Put those into the comments for us. First up, we had a question from Martin asking, were these cetaceans historically found in San Francisco Bay?
Yeah,
So
that's
humpback whales and grays.
Yeah, that's a really good question because every species that we see, a cetacean species, has a different story, a different background. So for harbor porpoises, they were here historically, and by World War II, they were pushed out of the bay. There was a submarine net that was stretched all the way across the bay, that not just to keep enemy submarines out, but also it kept whales and dolphins out. So World War II was not a good, happy time for humans as well as the wildlife in the bay. So that's changed, of course, and the bay is now more of a welcome place with fish for these populations. So harbor porpoises were here; they were pushed out. Bottlenose dolphins were not here. And so they're coming for the first time up from the coast. Humpback whales have never been seen feeding in the bay before. We've had lost whales. We've had back in the 1980s, there was Humphrey the whale, kind of a famous lost whale that went all the way up towards Sacramento, up the Sacramento River. And we've had Delta and Dawn, another pair of lost humpback whales in 2007. But starting in 2016, well, this is a picture. Tim and I were on a boat and we saw this whale under the Golden Gate Bridge. This is 3 years ago, 2019. And this whale was feeding on anchovy in San Francisco Bay. So 2016 was the first year we ever saw this phenomenon of humpback whales coming in to feed, and they've been keeping it up every year. And again, I saw one today, this morning, right under the Golden Gate Bridge. I was standing on shore looking at it, feeding right there. And then gray whales are a different story again, where they have not really been here historically. There's always been one or two gray whales sort of poking their way into the bay on their migration, and then they might leave after a few hours or a day. But now we're seeing ones like this one. This is a photo. Tim and I were out on a boat and we saw this whale inside the bay just a few weeks ago. And it's been staying here for a matter of weeks or maybe even a month. And that's very unusual. So that is something we have not seen before 2019. And that's part of this unusual mortality event, this event where they're not getting perhaps enough food. You can actually tell by looking carefully at this whale. You see the blowholes on the right there. And then behind the head, there's a little dip. And that's not supposed to be there. Usually a very a whale in good health with a lot of blubber has a solid layer of fat right back there. But it's thin here because this whale is hungry.
I see. And that actually segues very nicely into another question from Azul. Since we're talking about these whales feeding now in the bay, are many eating plastic? Is that something of concern?
Tim, you want to?
There have been records of whales eating plastic. Again, this would be from post-mortem observation. It's not something sort of you generally observe. And that was less with the baleen whales like these guys and more with the toothed whales that go after larger prey. Something else that can be seen in pinnipeds, some of the patients that the Marine Mammal Center looks after, as well as some of the larger odontocetes whales. I'm thinking whales like sperm whales. These guys, pretty rare to get a lot of excess stuff. But of course, you could see they gulp through and they pick up pretty much whatever's there in front of them. So they certainly can ingest plastics, other bits of floating debris. In the case of those gray whales scraping the bottom, anything on the bottom, bits of wood or debris that's floated down to the bottom is another possibility.
Right. I would say that the one thing I can add to that is that in 2015, a big male sperm whale washed up on the beach in Pacifica. And the Marine Mammal Center went out and did a big necropsy, and I was there for that. And I remember Dr. Cara Field opening up the stomach, and we were all very concerned, and we wanted to look to see if there was plastic in there, because in other parts of the world, particularly in Asia, we get reports of these kinds of animals with plastic in their stomach, and there was none. And in fact, it was full of little small squid beaks. And the beaks of squid are actually pretty hard, and they last a long time in the digestive tract. And that's exactly what you want to see. That animal had been feeding normally and naturally on its main prey item, squid. So we have not seen a terrible amount of plastic in the whales in our local area.
That's right.
That's great to hear. At least one less worry here for some of the whales in our San Francisco Bay. And I'm curious too, and for our audience, feel free to continue putting in any questions into the comments there, and we'll be sure to direct those up here. And as we're waiting for more questions, I'm curious for those that are local in San Francisco Bay. Bill and Tim, you've mentioned that you've been able to get out and see some of these whales, even on the shoreline. Are there a couple areas within the Bay Area that you would recommend people can go to see some of these cetaceans?
Yeah, sure. There's some fantastic spots. And I'll tell you that number one spot that people don't realize is a wonderful wildlife observatory is the Golden Gate Bridge. And what I do is I look at a tide table and I go out at high tide. That's the best time. You're almost basically guaranteed to see harbor porpoises just around and after high tide out there. Sometimes, like this is a photo I took of a bottlenose dolphin that came right under the bridge. And sometimes, like today, if you'd been on the bridge this morning, you would have seen whales spouting because the pedestrian walkway that you can walk out at any time during the day looks into the bay, and sometimes you can see it. And here's a stellar sea lion, a pretty uncommon sea lion that I got to see. I photographed this also from the Golden Gate Bridge. So that's one wonderful spot to be able to go. And Tim, you can maybe mention some coastal spots too.
Sure. I'll just add, I remember being out with Bill and taking a class of students. I also do some teaching at UC Berkeley, and I brought my class of students in the marine mammal class out to just look down from the bridge one summer afternoon around high tide, and we looked down. When Bill was with us, you'll recall, we were watching 6 lunge feeding humpback whales beneath our feet. It's pretty amazing. And some of those photos that you saw earlier of the lunge feeding humpbacks were actually taken straight down from the bridge. So it's a wonderful place to watch them. Other places along the coast, we often get sightings of bottlenose dolphins, especially along some of the beaches. That would include Baker Beach in the city. Sometimes people will see dolphins in and around, as we mentioned, Alameda as well. And then down along the south coast off Pacifica, you can see both whales and dolphins if you're lucky. Typically humpbacks, occasionally gray whales, and also bottlenose dolphins on down along the coast of Half Moon Bay as well. And then up along the north coast, you can see especially dolphins as well. So all along our coastline here in the Bay Area and right on through the Bay. Another great place Bill mentioned is Cavallo Point, right down next to, what is it called there? The Bay Area Discovery Center.
Museum. Yeah, for kids, yeah.
It used to be really, my kids have grown up a bit now, but they used to love that place. And if you kind of go out the end there, you often can see, we actually just photographed some bottlenose dolphins off of there, and it's a very, very common to see harbor porpoises right from there. And occasionally, as Bill just saw, you can see whales from there as well.
Right. And I would say the only other spot I would also add is the Cliff House Sutro Baths area in San Francisco, where that's looking over sort of the Ocean Beach area. But I find that little high cliff near the Cliff House, which is unfortunately closed as a restaurant. I read in the paper, sadly. But anyway, that whole they have some platforms around it. That's a great spot for looking for dolphins and whale spouts during the gray whale migration and during the humpback season in the summer and fall.
Mm-hmm. And occasionally around Tiburon too, right? Well, we could see gray whales around Tiburon there. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I know I will be taking advantage of getting out to some of those spaces to see these amazing marine mammals. And I'm going to check here in case we have any other questions that have come into the chat. I also had one more question that I'll ask as we're waiting for any last questions to come in from our audience. In the past, with the photo ID work that you've both been doing and seeing individuals return to San Francisco Bay year after year, there are some that are maybe a bit more memorable than others that even have some names or unique characteristics. I recall last year there was a humpback whale named Crazy Ivan who was named such because of his interesting feeding behavior. Would you like to share any individuals that you can recall like Crazy Ivan or others that you see returning year after year?
We have a new whale that was just named Tina and was first sighted in the bay by our two graduate students we work with, Becca Lane and Allison Payne. And Tina set the new record for early arrivals, right? March, what was the date in March, Bill?
9th, March 9th.
So you know, these guys come in seasonally. You know, in the summer months, typically they come up here to feed, and so they breed. They're part of you know, threatened and endangered populations that breed off the coast of Mexico and Central America, and they're down there in the winter months. And here we have a really early arrival, and I believe we're looking at a picture of Tina now with the San Francisco skyline behind. We had a beautiful day out on the water with her. She just kept posing with San Francisco behind and the Berkeley Hills behind, and it was so wonderful to see her. And I remember that was a day that we got a chance to hang out with her as well as some gray whales. And so this kind of overlap where we have two species of great whales with very different ecologies and life histories, both using San Francisco Bay, it's pretty amazing. You know, as somebody who grew up here, this never happened. What an amazing time to be alive and hanging out here at the Bay for whales and dolphins and porpoises, as well as us that just humans that get to hang out with them. Amazing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and we've had other really unique animals. We've had a porpoise, harbor porpoise, that was in the bay for a couple of years, and it was almost pure white. It was not quite albino, but close. And we called this thing Mini Moby. And we could see it come from miles away because you could see this beautiful, almost pure white animal going all the way under the Golden Gate Bridge and into the bay. So that was another really sort of famous porpoise we had. We've had dolphins. Tim's already mentioned one, Kaimi, that lived for a couple of years off Alameda and now has rejoined its group mates on the outer shore. So Kaimi's now swimming up and down along the coast. And we've had other ones, dolphin mothers that we've seen with calves. And they'll had, you know, more than one calf. They don't have calves very often. It's every 3, 4, 5 years between them. But we've actually seen mothers with over time with more than one calf. So it's great to see them, you know, giving birth right in our area. You know, so this is not something they go back to Southern California for. It's happening here. So that just means the population is comfortable and they've got a good environment. They've got a lot of food and it's a good place for them. And that's something we should be proud of and we should take steps to make sure that they thrive here.
Yeah, you know, our research, you know, most recently has shown that we actually now have a substantial portion of the total sort of California coastal population of bottlenose dolphins living right here in the San Francisco Bay area, and then some going back and forth between here and Monterey Bay. but they've clearly sort of expanded up into this area. I was wondering, Bill, did you want to mention any of the pioneers that went a bit further?
Yeah, sure. So one of the amazing things we found out not long ago is that by looking carefully at these photographs of the dorsal fins of bottlenose dolphins, we heard about some dolphins that were in Puget Sound. We were called by one of the researchers up there, and they said, we've got some bottlenose dolphins here in Puget Sound, which is unheard of. They've never had live dolphins running around in Puget Sound up near Seattle. And so they finally got a couple of photographs, sent it to them, and we were amazed. They were ones that we knew well from San Francisco Bay. One's name is Stump and one's name is Miss. And these things had on their own traveled, 1,000 kilometers north up into Puget Sound, where they're apparently living now. We've never seen them come back. So that's how these animals can expand their range over time. And it takes exploration. It takes a certain amount of, persistence and a little bit of their native intelligence to be able to figure out how to go to a completely new area and find food and navigate. But they certainly can do it, because we've seen them do it from Southern California to Monterey Bay to San Francisco Bay, and now stretching beyond all the way up to Washington State.
Well, that's amazing to hear, and a testament to how these conservation and restoration efforts can make a huge difference for these marine mammals being able to find the food sources they need to thrive in the ocean. And again, because the theme of Earth Week and Earth Day has been restoring our planet, that is a perfect alignment with how the Marine Mammal Center's work and your work as the Cetacean Field Research Team is really contributing to this. So thank you both so much for sharing those wonderful stories and all of that wonderful information about cetaceans in the bay. I want to remind everyone that right now, if you are feeling like you can donate to support the center as a nonprofit, that goes directly back towards all of these conservation efforts. And currently, you can double your dollar. We're going to match your donation. Simply text OCEAN to 41444 to double that gift, and it'll make a huge impact for us this Earth Week. So with that, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Tim, and all of our wonderful audience members. We do have one more Earth Day related event this week tomorrow. We are hosting a Stewardship Saturday, which is it's a free virtual program for high school students. So if you are a high school student or you know one, feel free to check out our website, marinemammalcenter.org, for more information on this free virtual program. And really, it's going to be learning more about youth climate action, which should be very interesting. So it is a free program. You just have to register to get our Zoom link. And that will kind of wrap our Earth Day events for this week. So thanks again so much, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful Earth Week. Thank you, Bill and Tim. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.